January 12, 2005 was the coldest night Chicago had seen in decades. The wind howled through the empty streets, sending the temperature plummeting to 15 degrees below zero. For firefighter James Wilson, it was supposed to be just another graveyard shift at Firehouse 51. He sat at his desk, scrolling through photos of his family, old memories of his late parents and sisters who had passed away in a tragic accident 5 years ago. The isolation of being the last Wilson weighed heavily on his shoulders. The piercing sound of the alarm shattered the midnight silence. All units, suspicious activity reported at 1247 West Harrison Street. Possible smoke from abandoned building. James and his team rushed to their gear, the familiar rhythm of boots hitting concrete and equipment being secured. As they sped through the deserted streets, something felt different about this call. The abandoned warehouse district was known for homeless people seeking shelter, especially on brutally cold nights like this. The massive fire truck pulled up to a dilapidated 3-story building. No visible smoke, no flames, just an eerie stillness broken only by the howling wind. James led his team inside, flashlights cutting through the darkness. Their boots crunched on broken glass and debris as they swept the ground floor. Fire department. Anyone here? James's voice echoed through the empty space. That's when he heard it, so faint he almost missed it. A whimper, barely audible over the wind. James held up his hand, signaling his team to stop. There it was again, coming from behind a pile of rotting wooden crates. Over here, James called out, his heart racing as he carefully moved toward the sound. What he found next would change his life forever. A cardboard box, dampened by melting snow that had blown in through broken windows. Inside, wrapped in thin, dirty blankets, were 3 tiny babies. Their skin was turning blue from the cold, their cries growing weaker by the second. I need medical now. James's voice cracked with urgency. He quickly removed his thick firefighting coat and wrapped it around the infants. As he cradled them close to his chest, trying to share his body heat, he noticed they were identical, 3 beautiful baby girls, no more than a few days old. The next few hours passed in a blur of sirens, hospital corridors, and urgent medical procedures. James refused to leave the emergency room, pacing back and forth as doctors worked to stabilize the baby's body temperatures. Each tiny girl was hooked up to monitors, their fragile lives hanging in the balance. Detective Sarah Martinez arrived at the hospital shortly after, her face grim as she reviewed the evidence. No witnesses, no surveillance footage, no clues about who had left 3 newborns to freeze to death. The only item found with them was a torn piece of paper with a hastily scrawled message, "Please save them." "I'm sorry." As James watched through the NICU window, something stirred in his heart. He thought about his empty house, the silence that greeted him every night, the family photos that only brought memories of loss. These 3 innocent girls, abandoned and alone, needed someone to fight for them. "Detective," James called out, his voice steady despite the emotion building in his throat. "What happens to them if no one claims them?" "Foster care, most likely," Martinez replied. "Triplets are hard to place together. They'll probably be separated." The words hit James like a physical blow. He couldn't explain it, but the thought of these sisters being torn apart felt wrong on every level. Before he could stop himself, the words tumbled out, "I want to adopt them. All of them." Martinez looked surprised. "James, that's a huge responsibility. Single parent, 3 newborns, your job as a firefighter." "I have savings, a house that's paid off, and enough love to give," James interrupted. "My parents left me everything, and I've just been existing since losing them and my sisters. These girls, they're a sign. A chance to have a family again, to give them the love they deserve." Over the next few weeks, as the babies grew stronger in the NICU, James threw himself into preparing for their arrival. He converted his home office into a nursery, took parenting classes, and filed all the necessary paperwork for adoption. His fellow firefighters rallied around him, helping with renovations and offering support. The day he officially named them was emotional. Looking at their tiny faces, peaceful in their hospital bassinets, he chose names that honored the strong women he'd lost. Emma, after his mother who had taught him compassion; Sophia, after his older sister who had always protected him; and Olivia, after his younger sister whose laughter had filled her home with joy. Finally, after 32 days in a hospital, James brought his daughters home. As he carefully placed each sleeping baby in their crib, tears rolled down his cheeks. The house that had felt so empty for so long was suddenly full of purpose and love. That night, as snow fell softly outside, James sat in the rocking chair between the three cribs. The steady sound of tiny breaths filled the room, a symphony that made his heart swell. He didn't know what challenges lay ahead, but he knew with absolute certainty that finding these three angels was no accident. "Welcome home, my beautiful girls," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Daddy promises to always keep you safe, to never let you feel abandoned again. We're a family now, forever." Little did James know that this was just the beginning of an extraordinary journey that would span decades, leading to a revelation that would shake their world to its core. But for now, in that peaceful nursery, everything was perfect. A father and his three daughters, brought together by fate, destiny, and the unwavering power of love. Raising triplet daughters as a single father was no small feat, but James Wilson approached it with the same dedication he brought to saving lives as a firefighter. The early years were a blur of midnight feedings, coordinated diaper changes, and learning to distinguish his identical daughters by their subtle differences: Emma's small birthmark behind her ear, Sophia's slightly curled eyelashes, and Olivia's dimple that appeared only when she truly smiled. His fellow firefighters at Station 51 became extended family, creating a rotating schedule of uncles who would help when James was on shift. The station's break room transformed into an impromptu daycare during his working hours, complete with 3 matching playpens and a chorus of baby giggles that brought light to even the darkest calls. As the girls grew, their personalities began to shine through. Emma, the oldest by 3 minutes, showed an early fascination with music. It started when she was 4, methodically pressing keys on the old piano James had inherited from his parents. While other children banged randomly, Emma would sit for hours, trying to recreate melodies she'd heard. By age 7, she was taking lessons, her small fingers dancing across the keys with surprising grace. Sophia, the middle sister, was their fearless adventurer. She gave James countless heart attacks with her climbing abilities and absolute fearlessness around water. During their first family vacation to Lake Michigan, when the girls were 6, Sophia disappeared for a terrifying minute, only to be found helping a younger child who had gotten stuck in a tide pool. "I want to save people like Daddy," she declared proudly, wringing out her soaking clothes. Olivia, the youngest by 5 minutes, was the observer. While her sisters commanded attention in their own ways, she watched and learned. James would often find her in his home office, poring over his old medical training manuals from firefighting courses. She asked endless questions about the human body and how it worked, her eyes lighting up with each explanation. The challenges of raising 3 girls became more complex as they entered their teenage years. James learned to navigate conversations about makeup, dating, and female issues with an openness that made his daughters feel safe coming to him with anything. He attended dance recitals, swim meets, and science fairs, often rushing straight from a 24-hour shift, still smelling of smoke but beaming with pride. There were hard times, too. When the girls were 13, they faced their first major crisis. Emma, usually the most composed of the 3, had a breakdown after finding old newspaper clippings about the night they were found. The article painted a harsh picture, speculating about what kind of mother could abandon 3 newborns in freezing weather. James found her crying in the attic, her sisters huddled around her protectively. That night, he sat them down and shared everything he knew about their discovery, holding nothing back. "I may not have given you life," he told them, wiping tears from their cheeks, "but finding you gave my life meaning. You weren't abandoned that night. You were delivered to exactly where you needed to be." As high school approached, each girl's path became clearer. Emma's talent at the piano evolved into serious study of music composition. Her original pieces began winning competitions, their haunting melodies often inspired by the story of their unusual family. By 17, she was being scouted by prestigious music conservatories. Sophia's childhood fascination with rescue work never wavered. She joined the junior lifeguard program at 14, breaking records in their training exercises. When she wasn't practicing with her high school swim team, she was volunteering at the local community pool, teaching water safety to young children. Her instructors said they'd never seen someone so naturally gifted at spotting people in distress. Olivia's path to medicine started in her sophomore year when she began volunteering at the same hospital where she and her sisters had spent their first month of life. She shadowed doctors in different departments, but always found herself drawn to the emergency room. The controlled chaos, the rush of saving lives, the need for quick thinking. It reminded her of the stories about her father's work. Through it all, James marveled at how three identical girls could be so uniquely themselves while maintaining an unshakable bond. They finished each other's sentences, felt each other's pain, and celebrated each other's victories as if they were their own. Their different interests never drove them apart. Instead, they supported each other fiercely. As their high school graduation approached, James found himself staying up late, watching old home videos. Footage of first steps taken in triplet synchronization, first words echoed by three voices, first days of school with matching backpacks but distinctly different excited grins. Each memory was precious, a reminder of the miracle that had walked into his life on that freezing January night. The girls were accepted into different colleges, Emma to Juilliard, Sophia to the University of Miami's Ocean Rescue Program, and Olivia to Northwestern's pre-med program. The thought of his daughters being separated for the first time in their lives filled James with both pride and melancholy. The night before they left for college, the family sat together on their back porch, looking at the stars just as they had done countless times throughout the years. "You know," James said softly, "the night I found you, I was feeling more alone than I ever had. I thought I'd lost my chance at having a family when my parents and sisters died. But you three, you weren't just babies who needed saving. You saved me, too." The girls huddled closer to their father, each holding onto a piece of him, their bonds stronger than blood or genetics could ever be. None of them could have imagined that in just a few short years, a revelation would surface that would challenge everything they thought they knew about their origin story, a truth that had been waiting 20 years to be discovered. But that night, under the stars, they were simply what they had always been, a family forged by fate, strengthened by love, and bound together by the heart of a firefighter who had followed his instincts on a cold winter night and found more than he ever dreamed possible. The morning of the triplets' 20th birthday dawned bright and clear in Chicago. James Wilson, now a seasoned fire captain with touches of gray at his temples, watched proudly as his daughters helped set up for their celebration in the backyard of their childhood home. Emma had flown in from New York, where she was making waves as an up-and-coming composer. Sophia took a break from her ocean rescue training in Miami, her skin sun-kissed from countless hours on the water. Olivia, now in her second year at Northwestern Medical School, had driven in from her campus apartment. The party was in full swing when the doorbell rang. James answered, expecting another guest, but found himself face-to-face with a woman he'd never seen before. She was elegantly dressed, with silver-streaked dark hair and eyes that seemed hauntingly familiar. "I'm Rebecca Harris," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "And I believe you're raising my sister's daughters." The world seemed to stop for a moment. 20 years of questions, of wondering about the women who had given birth to his girls, crystallized in this single moment. Rebecca's story poured out as she sat with James in the living room, her hands clutching a worn leather journal. Dr. Catherine Harris, her sister, had been one of Chicago's most promising trauma surgeons. On January 12, 2005, she was working a double shift at Metropolitan Hospital when a devastating fire broke out in the pediatric ward. Catherine was 6 months pregnant with triplets at the time, Rebecca explained, tears streaming down her face. She just discovered that their father, her husband, had been leading a double life. He had another family in Boston and had disappeared when she confronted him. The fire at the hospital had spread rapidly. Catherine, despite her condition, refused to evacuate while there were still children trapped inside. She managed to save 4 young patients, but the smoke inhalation and stress triggered early labor. She gave birth to the triplets in the midst of chaos, knowing she had been exposed to too much smoke. With her last strength, she wrote in her journal and made a choice, Rebecca continued, opening the leather-bound book. She knew she was dying. She also knew that firefighters would be searching the abandoned buildings nearby for people seeking shelter from the fire. She wrapped her babies warmly and left them where she knew they'd be found, not abandoned, but delivered to the very people she trusted most, firefighters. James sat stunned as Rebecca read from Catherine's final journal entry. "To whoever finds my daughters, I trust you are someone who saves lives for a living. I pray you'll save theirs too. I'm leaving them not because I don't want them, but because I want them to live. Their father abandoned us, and I'm dying, but I believe in the goodness of those who run toward danger to help others. Please love them as I would have." The backyard festivities fell silent as James and Rebecca walked out together. Emma, Sophia, and Olivia gathered close, their identical features, so like their mothers, showing varying degrees of shock and emotion. "Your mother died hero," Rebecca told them, her voice full of pride and grief. "She saved 4 children that night, and she saved you too. by making sure you'd be found by someone who would protect you forever. She would be so proud of who you've become. The revelation hit each sister differently. Emma sat at the piano, her fingers playing a melody that seemed to capture 20 years of unknown history. Sophia gripped the rescue certification badge she always carried, understanding now why saving others had always felt like her calling. Olivia held her mother's journal, reading through detailed medical notes that mirrored her own passionate approach to medicine. James watched his daughters absorb this new reality, his heart both heavy and full. "Your mother and I," he said softly, "we were the same kind of people. We both believed in running toward those who needed help, no matter the cost." That evening, as the sun set on their transformed world, the family sat together looking through the journal and the old photos Rebecca had brought. Stories of Catherine's life, her dedication to saving others, and her final act of love painted a picture of a woman who had given everything to protect her children. Emma, studying a photo of her mother in surgical scrubs, suddenly stood and walked to the piano. Her fingers found the keys, and a new composition flowed forth, a piece that spoke of sacrifice, destiny, and the invisible threads that had connected their family's story all along. Sophia and Olivia joined their sister at the piano, and James watched as Rebecca wiped away tears. This wasn't just a reunion or a revelation, it was the completion of a circle that had begun on that freezing night 20 years ago. "You know what this means," Sophia said, looking at her sisters with a teary smile. "We're not just the daughters of a firefighter who saves lives. We're the daughters of a surgeon who did the same," Olivia finished. "We're the daughters of two heroes," Emma concluded, her music swelling with emotion. James caught Rebecca's eye across the room, seeing in her face the same gratitude he felt every day for the privilege of raising these extraordinary young women. The story of their family had gained new chapters, but the love that had bound them together for 20 years remained unchanged. If anything, it had grown stronger. As night fell over Chicago, the Wilson house was filled with music, laughter, and tears, not of loss, but of finding something that had been waiting 2 decades to be discovered. Their family hadn't just grown by one aunt. It had expanded to include the heroic legacy of a mother who had made the ultimate sacrifice to give her daughters their best chance at life. And in that legacy, Emma, Sophia, and Olivia found not just their past, but a deeper understanding of their future. They were the daughters of two people who had dedicated their lives to saving others, and in their own unique ways, they were carrying that legacy forward, one life at a time.